It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Thursday, April 27th. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is getting more excited for the draft with U18 Worlds, Russ.
Yeah, I try and temper it because it's like a snapshot, but it's still fun.
Well, we're going to dig into results, the medal round, and some prospects, including a deep dive on Matthew Wood of Team Canada, all on today's show.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here, as always, with prospect expert Russ Cohen, who's on Twitter at Sportsology. You can subscribe or follow us for free on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, it's been a fun U18 tournament so far for the kids. I love World Juniors because I
Mhm.
think the level is a little bit higher, but with U18s, you're really honing in on draft possibilities because most of the kids in this tournament are 17 or 18 and are draft eligible for this year. Right now, we are in the short lull between the round robin and medal rounds that start today. Sweden won Group A pretty handily, and Team USA won Group B. Team USA has been pretty dominant thus far in the tournament. They lead with 37 goals overall in their 4 games. Plus, they have a 52+% power play efficiency, which is unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things going on. These guys have played together for a couple of years. You know, you got Perrault, Leonard, and Smith. They've been together like 2 years, so there's a lot of continuity there. That's a big deal. That's a big plus. What I really like is the just the way that the coach is kind of letting them be creative out there. That's good, especially for that top line. And they're kind of alternating who's scoring, which is great. The thing that stinks about what they're doing with the top line, and they only did it for like a second last game, is you never get to see Gabe Perrault away from Smith and Leonard. And we're all certain of what Smith and Leonard are, and we're not all as certain what Gabe Perrault is. And so that would really help everybody for the draft if we could see Perrault with a different line, but we're never going to do it. Even for the All American Prospects game, they didn't do it. So, it is what it is. You're going to have to, somebody's going to guess on Perot, and he's not going to go nearly as high as the other two simply because of this question.
Right. And, it's being said that this line is the best in the tournament by far. They've combined for 43 points in 4 games. Just
Yeah.
3 guys. That's
Yeah.
that's pretty special there. And Team USA is going to be facing Czechia in the quarterfinals. The other quarterfinals, we've got Finland versus Slovakia, Canada versus Switzerland, and Sweden versus Latvia. And with Team Canada, they finished second to Team Sweden in Group A. They started the tournament by losing 8-0 against that Sweden team. Was definitely a wake up call for them. I think they've recovered pretty nicely, played generally better. I think they've had a few bumps here and there, but I think that was definitely a pivotal moment for Team Canada's youth.
Yeah, there's no question. I think you saw Matthew Wood really break through, and we'll talk about him. Um, Celebrini's a guy who could go first next year, and he's having a really good tournament. He's got 6 points already in 4 games. I don't love their defense. I think the goaltending's okay. I don't think their offense is as good as the U.S., but we'll see because they still have a great top line and a great couple of lines. So, and it'll be close if they get to play the U.S. I think that would be a very close game. But I liked what I saw last game. Looked much better.
Yeah. Just before we dig a little bit more into Team USA and some more standouts outside of that top line, just want to talk a little bit about that tempering expectations, right? And how you evaluate talent in this tournament. Because, a lot of people's rankings are close to being set, and they use this tournament as a way to just tweak it or,
Hmm.
move people up or down a little bit based on how they match up against this top level competition, right?
Yeah, yeah. So as an example, I have Matthew Wood like 19 or 20, and I've had him there a while. Is this going to move him up? I don't know because I just wrote about him on Full Press Hockey, and we'll get more into detail. But this is just talking about anybody now. Do I know if he's a center or a wing? I'm not sure yet. He played wing his whole freshman year in college. So that's the thing. I have to now guess, and everybody has to sort of project and guess where certain players are going to play or end up in the NHL, and then that does matter where they get drafted. So that's a big deal too. And so I don't know. I don't think we're going to see Wood playing center in this tournament, right? I think he's still playing right wing from what I noticed, and I'm not fully caught up on everything yet. So that's not going to help. So you still don't know everything about. So you can't get crazy. But if you have, let's say, I don't know, Edward Shala not that high, yeah, you're gonna adjust that. And if you didn't know Stenberg, you're gonna adjust that. And if you didn't believe in Will Smith, you probably believe in him a little more now.
You
You know,
absolutely do.
yeah. So I think
So,
that could happen. Those guys could definitely get a bump.
how do you account for great players from weaker countries who are maybe getting relegated or, aren't in the quarterfinals?
I always have to take into account who they're playing with, right? And also when teams are playing against them, they could key against them. So, like in Shala's case, he looks great. I looked up point wise. He's got 5 points in 4 games, but he's got 4 goals. He's getting to the net. He knows he's that guy. Like,
Mhm.
Dalibor Dvorsky, same thing. He doesn't have the the same kind of insulation infrastructure that these other teams do. So these guys have to sort of go for it. And so I will give higher marks to a guy that's got to work harder to to carry his team. Absolutely. That's where someone like, Gabe Perrault is going to have more points than Edward Shala. Does that mean he's better? No. He's on a highly talented team on the best line in the game. Same thing with Ryan Leonard. And he had a terrific game last game. He was probably one of the best games I've seen him have ever. So you look at that, but again, you have to look at it and say, yeah, who are they playing with?
So, talking about that in the context of a couple of Team USA standouts that we haven't mentioned yet, sort of the big flashy name being bandied about right now is Cole Eiserman, who is a 16-year-old who's not eligible until the 2024 draft. He leads the tournament with 8 goals so far, been all over the place on, usually the third line
Yeah.
for Team USA. And so, how do you think about maybe these 16-year-olds who aren't eligible this year?
Yeah, I always mark them down. If I'm on a show, I'm not going to talk about them because I don't like to talk about the guys a year before their draft. I want to talk about the guys in their draft year because they deserve that time. Everybody, like last year, everybody wanted me to talk about Bedard, and it's like I want to talk about the guys in this draft. So, as far as in the context of this tournament, Eiserman looks great. His speed's there, the hockey IQ's there. He's got a tremendous shot. Uh, I've only seen him in one under 17 game, so I don't have a great book on him yet. As an example, like these other guys we were talking about, you know, not not Shala, but all the American guys, I've seen them like 5 times live this year. And
Right.
that's a lot. Besides what I've seen, on video, I don't have that kind of library in Eiserman, so I'm not going to start getting crazy. So I'm seeing a lot of what you're seeing, minus an extra game. So yeah, so far he looks good. He's on a tremendous team. Again, I never get too crazy. Celebrini is better, even though he may have more points. I think there's that thought. I've seen him before because he played with the Chicago Steel. So, you
Mhm.
know, it's some of it has to do with what you have more views on too.
Yeah, I also wanna talk about Carey Terrance,
Mhm.
who is one of the rare Team USA players who actually plays in the CHL. He's on the Erie Otters in the OHL,
Yeah,
as opposed to being part of the development team program, and, he's had a pretty solid year for Erie, 47 points in 67 games, and in this tournament has a goal and 4 assists for 5 points in those 4 games, and he's, like, really, I think, gelled nicely in with the rest of this roster, who, again, he doesn't play with on a regular basis, and I think it says a lot
sure.
that he's stood out like that.
No, it definitely says a lot, and it definitely looks good. Would I rather see Quentin Musty? Yeah, I'd rather see Quentin Musty. I don't know. I mean, he's having an even better year. Again, sometimes coaches know a guy. Sometimes there's this, edge when you've played for someone in a tournament, or sometimes you say something that annoys the program, and then you don't get to play. I'm not sure what it is with Musty, but I would rather see him there. I do think he's played well though, and I do think I've seen him in interviews and everything. Looks very poised. I
Very
haven't.
much so.
Yeah, I mean, before this, I haven't watched any of Erie Otters this year. Zero. That's a blind spot for me. But yeah, I'm getting caught up on him, and he looks pretty good. But I'm not going to get crazy.
All right. Well, we're going to dig a little bit more into some of the players you've mentioned already on the non USA teams coming up next.
Looking for a delicious treat, but don't want all the fat and calories? Then you got to try a Built Bar. I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year, but I don't want to compromise on taste. And if you're like me, Built is just the thing for you. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in unbelievably delicious flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. On the healthy side, they're only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com. Now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can get up to 4 bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to Sam Clubs, run in and grab a 13 bar box and with our hit flavor, brownie, batter, and churro. You can thank me later.
All right, Russ. So, continuing our discussion on the U18s and some draft prospects that are making an impact, looking a little bit more at Team Canada, we will be digging a little deeper into Matthew Wood in the next segment here. But talking about a couple of other guys, the only Canadian players other than Matthew Wood to kind of crack the top 10 in scoring so far are Callum Ritchie and Macklin Celebrini. You mentioned Celebrini a little bit, but like, what is your take on these two guys?
Well, Brady's a future star, and I might use other verbiage down the line. He scored like 80 points with the Steel. I watched him two. That's this season. Was it this season with the Steel? I guess it was. Um, and he was really good. I mean, really, really good. He's a young guy. I mean, we're talking about a 16-year-old, and yeah, he was. When I went to the USHL tournament, he was there. He's got that Shattuck background, so pretty big
Always
deal.
a good one.
Huh?
Shattuck is always a good sign.
Yeah, yeah. Richie's good. Although I think I heard Craig Button say that he looked a little lazy on a couple plays. He is a really good player. I have him pretty highly ranked. Uh, I think he's done everything you would expect him to do. So I don't think he's hurt himself. I don't think he's raised himself necessarily in the rankings, but we'll see. I mean, if he could, continue to have this kind of tournament, uh, maybe I'll even look at Richie a little different. He's a guy that I have to admit, haven't really seen anything great out of him. Very good,
Hmm.
but I haven't seen anything great. And sometimes you want to see that little something that sets them apart. And I don't really have that for Richie yet. Like I'm looking, on my rankings, I have him 28, and so he definitely could
Right.
go up in my rankings. I wouldn't do it yet. I want to see when the games are on the line now.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And, one of the things that is a pretty common trend, I think, when people are watching this tournament and World Juniors, to be honest, is people tend to focus a little bit too much on a single game effort and
Yes.
not taking it in the context of the career overall or the year overall and where the players trending. I think that is definitely the case with Dalibor Dvorsky
Oh yeah.
from Slovakia. He has 5 goals and 3 assists in the tournament. Nothing to sneeze at, don't get me wrong, and he's an excellent player, but he had a 4-goal, 1 assist game in this comeback shootout win versus Czechia. It
Mhm.
was definitely the best single game in the tournament to that point of any individual player. But like, let's not get too ahead of ourselves here, right?
No, I agree. It's not like I'm going to move him up beyond 7 where I have him, and I'm not going to move him down for sure. He's kind of like a showman like that. When he kind of gets rolling, gets going, he really can put on a show. And I don't hold it against him that he can't, like, score 2, 3 goals every game based on the team that he's got and who he's facing. So he's got a tough job, and he's been playing against men. So the fact that he already has these kinds of numbers, I think, bodes very well for him. I think I'm happy that people are talking about him now because he's kind of been a polarizing guy. Even if again, if I tell you he's really good defensively, there's people on Twitter that'll argue with me, right? But end of the day, I
Mhm.
think now nobody's going to argue that his offensive game is really good. And again, you really do need to see him on a well-rounded team because even like when he's playing the AIK, he's one of the younger guys. So we're really not going to get the benefit of doing that. And that's happened with a lot of European players. Like, but somebody like Otto Stenberg has an edge, right? Because his team is better.
Yep. That is for sure. And so when a guy is ranked sort of mid to like 2/3 of the way down in the first round, but has a tournament like this, I think, the rankings sometimes overcompensate for a single good tournament. And
Mhm.
so like if he jumps a ton after this tournament, I would be concerned just in terms of like knowing, like you said, who is he playing with? What is his competition to really understand, where he should be. And you don't want the Flyers to just see a shiny object like this.
Well, they did that though. Like I had this conversation with you that Scott Lawton was once that shiny object, and you
Right.
know, we looked at it and both said, yeah, maybe not the ideal spot to take him, but it certainly was their guy, and it's worked out well. So it can work out doing that. Sometimes you just, again, you just see something in a player. Maybe you didn't see it. What happens a lot of times when scouts go out, like you go out a couple times early in the season, maybe the guy's sick, maybe the guy's, he's out for that game. You miss him. Okay, I'm going to go try and catch him again. You don't catch him again. And then maybe you only see his best play in the tournament like this. That happens, because of injuries and especially during the COVID era, right? So, it's not the norm, but it happens. And Lawton was one of those guys.
I think Scott Laughton has turned out to be a pretty solid
Yeah.
player for the Flyers, but maybe at that level of pick, not sure. But moving on, you did mention Otto Stenberg a few times, so I want to talk about him right now. He's probably one of the best all-around players in the tournament. Um, and he's in the top 10 of the European players in terms of the central scouting rankings right now, and is a really solid skater as well. Doesn't have
So what
too
did you say
much.
Central Scouting had him? I glitched a little.
Top 10.
Top 10. Okay, for European, right.
Yeah. Yeah, and he has 9 points in this tournament in 4 games.
Yeah. I mean, again, so the thing about Stenberg is this. I saw him early in the year with the Five Nations, and I've seen him a little bit since, and he does look like he's better. Uh, I wrote about him for Elite Prospects because my big thing on Stenberg was I needed to see like big finish out of him, and he did it. He won a game with a last minute one timer. He plays a full 2-way game. You heard what Craig Button's been really saying great things about him, and Craig Button sat next to me at the Five Nations, so we were talking about Stenberg a lot, and he was coming through. He's a guy that you could expect to see go up a little bit in my rankings because I was being cautious, and I wanted to
Right.
see him again against his own age group. Like this is where it's valuable for me to see him against his own age group because he's been playing up in age. So he's passing that test. And if
Yeah.
he keeps passing that test, then yeah, there's going to be another adjustment with him because again, he could play center or wing, and he's got a well-rounded game already. And yeah, he's one of the top scorers in this tournament. So that's going to play really well, and I think it is going to play with his rankings for sure. I mean, again, just to give you an example, like this year, he's only got 3 points in the SHL, but when he played in the J20, he had 26 points in 29 games. So it's good that he's getting this last view against his own age group because, if he was dominating the SHL or at least getting close to that, I shouldn't say dominating, like Carlson, you'd say, all right, he's got to be in the top, 12, 13, 14, but he wasn't. So now you have to look at him again against his own age group, and there'll be a course correction for Stenberg.
Yeah, I think that is definitely the case. I think a similar situation, although I think I might want to be a little bit more cautious, is Kasper Halttunen from
Mhm.
Team Finland, who has 5 goals, 3 assists in this tournament, is absolutely a huge standout for Team Finland. I've been very impressed. But kind of the word on him is that he's extremely successful in like U18 or U20 play, but he spent time in the top Finnish league and just isn't quite there yet. Like only had 1 assist in something around like 27, 28 games. But the fact that he can dominate in this sort of environment, he's a super strong skater, power forward, picks his shot, but hasn't quite been able to translate that against the big boys yet.
Right, and so he was really good in the Five Nations, but the problem is when I start putting him up against the other talent in the first round, this is a really talented first round. So I don't know if it's going to change my opinion of where I have him. I have him at 33. I don't know if that's going to change. It could, based on if he just keeps looking up, then maybe. But I think he's kind of like almost a forgotten guy before this U18s. I didn't hear him being talked about a lot, and luckily I had exposure to him, so I kind of knew that he was a little bit of a player. And I do think there's some of that in between ground of where you think his game is at. So I'm with you. I do want to see more.
Yeah. Well, before we switch gears in our next segment to talk more about Matthew Wood, just want to toss out there Adam Juracek, David's brother, who also is a defenseman, is a 16-year-old playing for Czechia, and I think he's having a pretty solid tournament so far.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't want to get too wrapped up into the Euro checks right now because we've certainly
Right.
mentioned him a ton on this show, and then people are going to think like, "Oh, wait, does he know the family? Does he is he getting a check?" No, 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 and no pun
Nope.
intended there.
All right.
One guy I want to throw in there is Lenny Hamit. Oh boy, Haminaho for Finland. He's a guy that I have ranked right after um, the other Finn that we were just talking about, right after Halttunen. And I think it's interesting because he's got 2 points in 5 games, but he also is a center. So there's some he could play center. Let's say I have him as left wing, but I've seen him play center, and so it's interesting to see what could happen with him. But so far, he hasn't really come through. But I'm still watching him. He's probably not going to change on my list, but he is a guy that is on my sort of list to see, can he do more? Can he do more? And he hasn't done more yet, so that's why he stayed where he is.
All right. Well, like I said, we're going to talk about Matthew Wood coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know that part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. So Matthew Wood, he is an Alberta boy, 6'3", 190, and in the U18s so far, he's got 5 goals and 2 assists for 7 points in those 4 games. He is the top scorer for Team Canada to this point, and he played for Yukon this past year as a freshman. He led the team in points, which is pretty remarkable. I know it's Yukon, but still, like, he came in
Listen,
there and
H. Thompson was at UConn. Like, don't kill him.
yeah, so he had 34 points in 35 games this season, and right now he's ranked mid to late first round, but I think this is one where people are gonna tweak it and maybe move him up a couple spots.
Well, I mean, Central Scouting's nuts. I think they have him fourth. I mean, that's just I
No.
don't understand that one. But I've been high on him. I spoke to him early in the season and had a long discussion with him and learned a few things about him. And I already knew a little bit about his play. I've learned more since about his play. Well, the first thing is he's almost 6'4". He's pretty much 6'4" now. He just at the time I spoke to him, he had gotten measured and he was over 6'3". He's still growing. He's like he just turned 18. So this guy could end up being, 6'4" and a half, 6'5". Wouldn't shock me at all because it seems like he's on that trajectory. So each season now, he kind of has to tweak his game a little bit based on his growth spurts. And it's not big growth spurts, but it matters. Uh, People talk about his speed because they don't like it right now, and I'm okay with it because I think his long stride is good, and he does practice explosive skating, and I think it's going to get better. I think when his muscle kicks in and he's got a little more force with his skating, I think that will give him that extra push off that he needs for speed. So I think that'll be there. He's a guy that can make a slick drop pass like a smaller guy or goes right to the net. And you saw when he was going to the net. I think it was with Celebrini. It's it's hard to stop, man. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of talent between the two. But he also did what like a backhand goal that was pretty amazing. Like when he's around the net, he is hard to handle. Like he's got very good hands.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed, that his net front presence is really tremendous, and that I think, for the Flyers, it's something to consider because the net front presence, I think, has been a little weaker, especially, with JVR not really panning out in
Yeah.
that area, and they don't have a ton of that, right? A couple of their younger guys are more of a, shoot from the slot kind of guys.
Well, he is that guy too. He's got a wrist shot that he can wire from a long distance. He'll also play hard in the corners. The question is whether he would be a center or a wing. He's been playing wing right now. I did an article for him on Full Press Hockey and dug into it a little bit more, talking about this tournament using one of the quotes I used. I also wrote about him on Elite Prospects, so that's been up for 3 or 4 months. The big thing is, if you're telling me he's going to be a winger, I think he's going to be a second line winger. If you tell me he's going to be a center, I think he could be a second line center, but maybe it's a third line center. So I think unless he starts playing wing center soon, I think teams are going to draft him as a winger in mind because I think there's a higher ceiling there. But he assures me that hey, he can play center and he likes it. He thinks that at UConn at some point they're going to do that, but he doesn't know, right? Because he's not the coach. And if he
Right.
doesn't do that in the next year or two, I think that that probably goes off the board. But I still think he could be a second liner. And now the matter is, yeah, I've got him at 20. Is he going to move up? I don't know. There's guys like Richie I have, I think, just ahead of him. No, Richie I have 28, but there's other guys that we mentioned that I think that I have just ahead of him. And it's going to be tough. I have to make sure he's going to be faster. I have to take into account that because of his age, there's more runway for him because he just turned 18. The fact that he had a great freshman season in a good, hockey area, Hockey East is not easy. So that's, he's facing tough opponents. And I think he'll do that for at least another year or two, probably 2. Because the reason that he went to college was he was telling me that his family was happy about that, but also B, he knew he had to build up his body and he wants to kind of do that, at a good rate. So if the Flyers were to get him, the only way they're probably getting him is by trading down because if they go 7 or 9, I wouldn't
Yeah.
take him in that spot.
Yeah,
As much
he's
as I like,
definitely a trade down scenario. And I think you're right in terms of his size. I think one of the critiques of his play, and I've seen it a little bit, it's different in a U18 tournament where there's some similar sizes out there, but that he isn't quite there with fully being able to embrace his physicality
No, he
yet.
definitely he'll tell you that.
Yeah, and so I think that's a concern, and his skating needs to get a little bit better. But again, I think, with his plan to stay in college for at least a year, if not 2 more years, I think that's a good path for him, to really develop more fully.
Yeah, the other thing is he's got the vision of a center. So even if he ends up playing off the wall, if he ends up playing right wing, let's say, he still has the vision of a center, and you can see that with the way he looks down the ice. He's really smart too. Like you don't see a lot of mistakes out of him, and he can play at pace. UConn plays at pace, and he's tremendous on the power play. Like he's really good. He likes a lot of movement on the power play. So he's one of those guys that's not always going to be standing still. So this one's a hard one to project. He's hard to project simply because of the age and the fact that he's growing, and you know that he's going to be a power forward, and you know that it's going to take a little longer. So all of those things make him a lot more interesting of a case study. But there's definitely a potential big return here. So
Yeah,
that's where we're at.
all things to consider as we head into the medal rounds of the U18 tournament. And again, those start today and go through the weekend. We will talk more about it after the tournament is over next week and check in on some of these draft eligible prospects. Meanwhile, looking ahead to tomorrow's episode, everyday listeners will remember we talked about Travis Konechny a lot in our things that we are hopeful about for the Flyers episode earlier this week. And we're going to revisit TK in the context of figuring out some trade values for the Flyers' highest value assets. Danny Briere said everything is on the table. So we're going to look at TK, Kevin Hayes, and Ivan Provorov, see what their actual values might be and what the Flyers might be able to get in a potential trade. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So send in any mailbag questions you have via Twitter at Lockdown Flyers. You can email us at lockdownflyers@gmail, or you can comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.